Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Jamie. I am the VP of Marketing at Workshop, and I am here with one of my close friends and literally the only person I could think of inviting to this webinar that would be as perfect as she is. So the number one sort of goal-setting friend I have. I think if I had invited anybody else, it would have been offensive. Because Karen uses goal setting and OKRs in her personal life, in her professional life, pretty much everything. So Karen, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Super great to see some familiar faces and some new faces. I'm Karen Borchard. I'm the COO at Roca. We're an athletic and performance eyewear company based in Austin, Texas, but I'm based in Omaha, and I support our teams there with setting and achieving our goals and OKRs, and was formerly at Flywheel here in Omaha, which is where I met Jamie. So super excited to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. So Karen and I have, I've been using OKRs for, I don't know, maybe like 6 years now, but we developed a ton of them at Flywheel, our previous company, a few years ago. And I know that both Karen and I took those forward into our own organizations as well. So we're kind of like OKR nerds. I think that you are probably familiar based on kind of just signing up for today's webinar. But even if you're not, we'll kind of lightly touch on a few things too. But really, just OKRs are a goal-setting framework. The O stands for objective, the R stands for key result. And really, they're a great way to kind of align a company. And I think probably my favorite piece of them is just the fact that it allows any person within the company to kind of connect to a higher purpose. So I think that's why they are so important, and especially kind of in today's work world, why we get so excited about them. Karen, what's one of your favorite things about OKRs?
Yeah, I think that's it. The idea that every single person knows their impact on the business every single day. So that the idea, and when I first started reading or learning about them, the idea that you could walk through any company, whether it's a 5-person company or a 500-person company, and know that what you're working on, what you're working on impacts the overall goals of the company, and that's from a frontline support person to a person in executive leadership, or anywhere in the company. You can know and find that. That's the coolest part about it. It's a really simple framework that allows that.
Awesome. So we've got a handful of things that we're going to share with you. You should have gotten them in the webinar reminder email, but if you didn't, I'll post a link to the Google Drive folder here. But this folder includes a planning template, a checklist for writing great OKRs, kind of our recommended calendar as far as planning goes, and a spreadsheet for tracking key results. It's super, super simple. So nothing really complicated here. And then if there's any other resources that you might need, or if you need like a specific format for one of those, just email me. It's just jamie@useworkshop.com, and I will be happy to help. But really, as far as like kicking this off, we're going to go through a few different things. We're going to go through how to prep, or how we prep for OKRs, how we write them, how we measure them, and how we manage them. And then at the end, we'll have hopefully 10 or so minutes for an open Q&A. So if you have any questions as we go, if anything comes up, feel free to just hop in and ask your question in the Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And if you have anything to add during the conversation, if you have I assume your own experience with kind of planning OKRs, what's worked for you, what hasn't, feel free to add that into the chat too. So we'll go ahead and get started with just kind of how to prep for OKRs. Luckily, we are kind of in our perfect OKR planning season, as Karen and I like to call it. This webinar is perfectly timed for just planning OKRs for 2022. So don't worry, you are not too late. You're really not too early. You're kind of in the exact sweet spot. But as far as prepping for OKRs, you really do want to start early enough. Goal setting can take as Karen likes to say, between like 1 and 2 weeks at every different level. So as far as like starting with senior leadership, allowing yourself good 2 weeks to plan those. As far as cascading that down to like a department level, you'll want to allow yourself a similar amount of time. So as we said, right now is a great time to start planning your OKRs. And really it's all about storytelling. And I think just as far as getting in the right frame of mind for writing these OKRs. I know Karen has a lot of really great advice of how to approach goal setting as a story. So Karen, why don't you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So you touched on something before of, how long it takes, depending on which levels. And I think it's one of the very first questions you often get is, what are how many levels of goals should we be setting in our company? And I think overall, what we've both found is that the ability to set goal, make it as uncomplicated as you can. So if you're a really tiny team, you might just need one set of OKRs, just kind of one set of, 2 or 3 or 4 objectives and a couple of key results under each one. The objective is kind of what you're trying to achieve, and then the key results are kind of how you measure whether you got there. So if you're trying to hit, a few big things as a company and you're a company of 5 to 10 people, that's probably plenty to keep track of over the course of the year. If you're a larger organization and you really need a department or a team to kind of take on some component of those company level goals and then set additional goals that will roll up to those, then you may want to have both a company level and then a department level. And then there are some, organizations, much larger organizations, that will roll that down to the team level, to even sub teams within a department, and then also even to the individual level. So the ability for individuals to set. So knowing exactly how many, where you want, what level of granularity you want is a really good start as far as knowing that prep and then planning 1 to 2 weeks for each set of people that needs to do that. Is really good. And then the other thing people ask about that is, do you start at the top level or do you start with people's individual goals? And you can do both, but I think generally if you're trying to align your teams around a company direction, you want to start at the company level and really set the vision and tell the story. And that's kind of what Jamie mentioned before is, goal setting is really just storytelling. Goal setting is telling the story of the end of the year. So if you're setting your goals for 2022, you're asking yourself, at the end of 2022, it's December of 2022, and we're having this huge party because we achieved all of these absolutely amazing things this year. What's on that list? What are we celebrating at the end? And what does that look like? It's everybody calls it, when I call it that, when I ask that question, people call it the pizza party question. That it's like, what are you throwing a big party about at the end of the year? But that's really what you're trying to do first, is sort of cast that story and tell the story of the end of the year. And then you can also, of course, then tell the story of right now, of what's happening right now. That's sort of the beginning of that story. And then a lot of the OKRs along the way are, what are the things that we need to do to get from the story where we are in the story right now to this, what we want the story to be at the end of the year, and what are the steps or the parts of the story in between. So that's kind of what we mean when we say it's goal setting is storytelling. Yeah.
How do you think about, especially like with a kind of a yearly goal setting? I know you're a big New Year's resolution buff as well.
What?
And with our calendar, we kind of did approach it as like a very clean, like you kick off your Q1 OKRs, your yearly OKRs right at the start of the year, and you kind of revamp those per quarter, check in on those per month or maybe even per week. I know a lot of people can get tripped up by goal setting if they want to do it in October or in June. How do you think about just kind of approaching the year, or like why? I know for us, we always just like naturally aligned to the year. It was always the easiest. But I think one of the challenges can be like, what if you want to like implement this today?
Yeah. I think it's such a good question. I think, we all kind of know that the year is, I mean, it's kind of arbitrary, right? Like New Year's resolutions are too. It's like, why in January do you decide to start exercising? It's like kind of a silly, arbitrary timeline. So the most important thing to know is that it's never too early, too late, or the wrong time to start setting goals and hitting them. And if you're setting goals, if you want to go into the beginning of the year with your goals for the year set, because it just feels great to do that, or you have a board meeting, or you're putting forth you do a big all hands with your team at the beginning of the year. It's a great thing to do that, and it's really, really good to start in Q4. So starting anywhere between October and December, knowing that Q4 is kind of a month long. You lose a lot of November and December to holidays and people being out and things like that. So the idea of starting, if you really want to have your OKRs just like set and feeling awesome, and you're coming in like hit the ground running on January 1 or January 2, it's a great thing to do them ahead of time. However, if you don't, tons and tons and tons of organizations have the very best of intentions of having those goals done before the end of the year, but they don't, because things go crazy and you're trying to hit your end of the year numbers and the end of quarter numbers and all that stuff. And so, taking the time to say, okay, our first quarter OKRs or our January OKRs are going to be really teeny. They're going to be really, really small because we're doing them in a condensed time frame. That's okay. Think of any time you want to start. If you said, I want to set OKRs for November and December of this year, great. Just set it so that they're the right size for the time period that you have, and then get that started. And sometimes actually having a really short period, like a month or a 2-month kind of trial run of OKRs, is really, really good to just kind of get people into the cadence of reporting on them and talking about them, and seeing if they're the right size before you're like, okay, these are our annual ones, or okay, these are our quarterly ones. Sometimes it can be kind of nice to actually, almost do like a little pilot program of your OKRs.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love it. The other big thing with prepping OKRs, I think, is the way you think about like the cascading, and you kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. I think if you first look into OKRs, it does feel like they're supposed to be this like perfect cascading waterfall, and we've built that before, and it can get very, very complicated. But I think that
Jane, will you explain what is meant by the cascade? Like what that is, like the theory behind it is?
Yeah. So the theory is you kind of start at the top with a company level objective, and then you sort of just waterfall those down to different departments. And from there, they waterfall down to different individuals. So you start with like a company level objective, and then the departments might take each of like a key result, make that their objective, create their own key results. And so far, all the way down to like an individual. You can go all the way down to individual OKRs. I think that can be a bit nerve-wracking because you want to see like it go cascade down to everybody. And you also don't necessarily want that like full top down approach all of the time. I do think both Karen and I have kind of alignment on like those top level for the year company objectives should probably be set by the senior leadership team. But you can do different surveys and a lot of kind of ways of getting feedback from the entire company before you start that. So for example, like right now would be a great time to run something like that. Like what should the company focus on next year? I know, Karen, you have like a really cool idea for an essay contest.
Yeah. It's pretty nerdy, but I actually, like, I've never done it. I really want to do it, but I've never convinced anybody that we should do it. So the idea is that rather than, so like right now, most times if you're starting like strategic planning, it'd be like, oh, who should be in our strategic planning session? It's like, well, obviously like the executives in the team, and then these leaders, and it's like, oh, but then like this person is helpful for it. And then it's like, well, if this person is going, then these 3 other people have to be there. And then suddenly you have a room of like 35 people and you can't set goals because there's too many people in the room. So the idea is, instead of doing all of that, you say, how do we make sure we get people with really great ideas who are super engaged and excited about this process in the room together? And so rather than letting like role or title or level in the organization determine who's in the strategic planning or the OKR setting room, you hold a contest, like an essay contest, like high school, and you ask every person who wants to, you make it optional, and you ask anybody who wants to write an essay of 1,000 words or less that says what you believe the company should focus on next year and what problems the company should be solving next year and how you think how they think they should do that. And then the CEO or the senior leadership team, perhaps, or somebody who really owns OKRs for the company, reads all of those essays and selects a group of people to come together to be the OKR setting team that's representative of the whole company, represents different departments, different levels, creates this kind of inclusive atmosphere for setting OKRs. And then the required reading for that group is to read every single essay that came in, so that every person who writes an essay absolutely gets their input heard in the process. And the people who are really bringing exciting ideas to the table and who are super engaged and motivated to be there are the ones sitting at the table and building those OKRs together. So if anybody tries that, please let me know. Like, please find me on Twitter or email and let me know. I want to hear all about it if somebody tries it. I haven't tried it yet. I'm sure it's got all kinds of like challenges with it, but I think it would be a really, really fun test.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think you can easily do a survey, but you're definitely not going to get the depth that you would get from something like that. So here's what that cascade kind of looks like. Again, like there are ways to facilitate a more bottoms up kind of approach to writing your OKRs, but this is kind of the general idea. And you can also have OKRs that align across different departments or are shared by different departments too. That's another great way to create alignment and make sure that you're not just getting kind of only that top down. I know that we talk like over this section as far as our minutes allotted. But I know writing OKRs can be one of like the most nuanced parts, and we'll share a few examples. There are a billion more examples in like the OKR book. I literally sleep with this like next to my bed. I mean, no lie, it's got all my tabbies. This is how excited I get about
She
OKRs.
really loves this book.
I really love this book. There are a ton of examples. We're totally welcome to like help you as well, but we'll go through a handful of our favorite examples, but writing them can be this like kind of nuanced and overwhelming process. It probably is the part of the process that takes the most time. So we'll go through kind of a few ways we approach OKRs and some of the best ones that we've written in the past. So we'll just talk first about just how to write objectives. Really, they are supposed to be this big kind of aspirational dream, especially if you're looking on like the company level. You really want it to be kind of something you're shooting for. And it can be something where the way it is written, it's very clear what accomplishment looks like. And it's something you want to do by the end of the year. So the example we have here is put a person on the moon by the end of the decade. It's very obvious whether or not that is achieved, like as it says, either the astronaut winds up on the moon or she doesn't. So that's kind of one way to frame objectives, is really to be kind of this big picture sort of dream. So some of the ones that we've written in the past have been even things like just, we want to create like the most delightful place to work ever, or like be the best place to work in Omaha in a specific space. So some of those are a few examples. And yeah, I mean, Karen, how do you think about just writing objectives?
Yeah, exactly what you said. I think the concept of make sure that it is time boxed for the time period. So if the objective is for the year, it should be, again, that like tell the story of the end of the year. So if we're trying to achieve, 90% year over year growth, then like, okay, by the end of the year, like, first of all, like, just like Jamie said, like, is it absolutely, exactly what accomplishment looks like? Yes. Okay. Like we'll know exactly if we achieve that growth. And then also, what the time frame is that you're trying to achieve that. It's year over year growth by a certain period of time. So I think being really clear about that, you do want to be, kind of meaningful and aspirational and inspirational. And you also want to be brief so that if you ask somebody, if you're like at lunch and you're like, hey, what are our 3 company OKRs for the year? They will know, like they will literally be able to just rattle them off really, really quickly. That's so important, because not because so much of like asking somebody at lunch, but if you then put yourself into a meeting 6 months down the road and somebody's like, I've got this super good idea and I think we should do X, Y, and Z. And somebody's got like they're super passionate about an idea. And you say, cool, what company objective does that roll up to? And they're like, oh, it goes to our 90% year over year growth goal. Then you're like, perfect, that's awesome. If they're like, it doesn't align to any of them, like it's a great, like, so people should be able to know those objectives so that they can use them day to day in their work. So they should be pretty succinct, pretty short.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Agreed. And as far as key results go, those are just basically, here's our objective as measured by blank. So you really want that to be a clear measurement and a clear outcome and not just like a task. A lot of times we've done something along those lines, and we'll definitely share the kind of mistakes we've made, but rather than just like a yay or a nay, you do want it to be more of a kind of good, solid measurement. And they should be a good mix of quantitative and qualitative. So you want to make sure you're incentivizing the right behavior. I mean, for example, like if you have something that's strictly like in marketing, a lead goal, and it doesn't involve conversion rates whatsoever, what can end up happening is you just pay a bunch for really low quality leads just to hit the number. I would never in a million years, but it's a good example of how you can write a key result and it not incentivize the right behavior. And there's a checklist included in that Google Drive folder that kind of takes you through how to write good OKRs, but we'll take you through that too. Here's a bunch of examples of a few for marketing team and HR team or a comms team of just kind of those sets of objectives and key results. I'll sit here and let Karen kind of unpack why some of these have worked and why they haven't. And we'll go through our list of mistakes too. But for example, just highlighting the ones here that you kind of resonate with, or ones that you've written in the past where you were like, nailed it.
Yeah. Okay, so I think there's some really, really good there. Like in these key results, you can see that there's lots of stuff that's very like clear key result oriented. One thing to always note as you're looking at them, and like there's some here that kind of are on the edge of this a little bit, right? So like create 5 new case studies is a really, like if you're you ask yourself like, does that result indicate that the objective? So does it result in being the best financial advisory firm in the world? Well, the creation of 5 new case studies might be really kind of a little bit more towards an activity. And so then that might be a key result where we ask like, okay, what are those like, but 5 case studies of like top customers that prove out and show that we're the best financial advisory firm in the world, like can absolutely fit in that. So you're always asking, is this the result, or is this a task or an activity? There's an awesome article, I can share it after this, just published, or I think recently published on in Harvard Business Review, that said I loved their definition of key result, which they said key results to be effective, they need to measure a change in the behavior of the target audience, or in the behavior overall. So you want to ask yourself in a key result, what's changing? And it said this is what makes it a key result and a measure of success, and not simply a documentation of energy being spent. And I loved that. Like if you're looking at your key results and you're looking at your OKRs of overall, and it's just a documentation of where we're spending our time, it's not a key result, right? So it's a great question. A really, really, really good question. So, less than 10 uses of the old logo during the entire quarter, like, that, like, yes, okay, like, and that does indicate that, like, okay, we have gotten rid of the old logo and we've rebranded the company. Like, that's what we were trying to do, and we did it. And that shows like what changed, right? Rather than just like, did we document energy being spent, which I think is a really helpful distinction for me.
Yeah, I think on the marketing side of things, the one that I related to the most, one that was kind of inspired by what we did at Flywheel, which was like the best OKR that I ever wrote at Flywheel, was rank number 19 for managed WordPress hosting. And that's what we did. And what it meant really is that's the bottom of the second page of Google. So really what we were looking for was moving our ranking kind of up so that we would at least be searched far more. And we were able to say something like we were the best managed WordPress host because we ranked at the bottom of the second page for that. The content team and the dev team, like everyone got involved with that. It was very, very memorable. It was very clear as far as what we were trying to do and why we were trying to do it. And it was something that like everyone could check in on the progress of that, even on their own. So it's something as far as like SEO goes and marketing, I think having a KR that is related to a specific search term that you're going for is kind of a really good rallying piece for the entire team. So I really think that was like one where we nailed the writing of it. Everyone remembered it, and everyone kind of was thinking in their free time outside of just doing like performance-based work, how can I contribute to that? Like, can I write an article that will help us rank? Can I create a video tutorial that'll help us rank higher? Can I do anything to increase the page speed of the site to help us rank higher? So that was an example that I was very happy with. But I know we have a ton of examples of things that you can do to make your OKRs less successful. Some mistakes that we have definitely personally made in the past. And to start, it's, I think, exactly what happens to a lot of different companies. And I know at my previous company, they actually stopped using OKRs because they went through a year of making some of these mistakes and then didn't pick them up and try again the next year. And I think that happens a lot. I think it's easy to try it once and get frustrated and abandon it, but hopefully we're going to help you avoid some of these. So number one, definitely the biggest mistake that you can make is just having too many of them. Karen, I know you have like a perfect way of thinking of how many you should do. So I'll let you share that.
Yeah. So it's the number one problem. And the reason it's the number one problem is because everybody forgets about the cascade. So like you're at the company, like you're setting the company OKRs and you're like, surely we can have 5 objectives and like 19 key results, like that won't be a problem. But the problem is then those 19 key results become the objective of the departments. And so then those turn into like those 19 key results become like departmentally become like 60 key results across all of the departments, and suddenly 60 is a lot too many. So what I like my kind of test on it, or litmus test on it, is to add up the number of OKRs that you have, or the number of total key results that you have at the company level, and divide it by 40. So divide it by the number of hours in a week, or divide it into 40, and know that that's how many, like, and then ask yourself, is that enough time per week for this company to dedicate to this important thing? And most of the time we'll find that it's not. So, you know, very often it's like, if you have like 2 hours a week total to try to become, you know, 19th on Google for a really specific search term, it's probably not enough. Like you have a 1 hour meeting with 5 people, that's 5 hours, right? So it's not enough time. That's usually not enough time. So always look at how many you have and divide it into 40. And then I would just say, as soon as you think that you're down to an acceptable number, reduce one more time at least before you come to that final one. And you'll be glad for it later. Like if you end up, like if everybody's like, oh, we can't possibly like not have this thing be an OKR, just say like, okay, no problem. We're going to do that one as soon as we finish one of these on the list. And the second this one is done, we can take on this new OKR. That's a good way to do it. And then that way you can always add more OKRs later if people are bored, but that's usually not what happens. Yeah.
Agreed. I think the other thing that we see a lot and have done a lot is writing an OKR and leaving it the entire time, making it inflexible. Really, OKRs are meant to adapt a bit. So what we'd often do is at least like once a month, we would kind of just do a start, stop, continue, or evolve exercise and say, like, is this OKR still, is it still the main priority? I mean, I remember having quarters where there was an OKR that we knew we weren't going to hit and we didn't even want to hit it anymore. It just had not, it was just not a company priority. And it wasn't a department priority anymore. And we just like left it. And then at the end of the quarter, we were like, yeah, we scored a 1 on that, but whatever. And it was like, that's not what you're looking for there. So you do want to either replace it with something that is a bigger focus or just remove it entirely. But they really should be your main priorities. So yeah, you definitely want to adapt it a little bit more than that.
Yeah, to Jamie's point, and I think, taking an OKR away or replacing it with something else, or just saying, hey, this isn't a priority anymore. I think the
Yeah.
main thing in that is like, number one, like absolutely do it, and like do that kind of loudly. Like say it across the organization, like we are prioritizing this, because in some ways it really like it creates a lot of trust in team members to know that like, yes, we're thinking about this. No, like we're not tone deaf. Just because this was a priority in January doesn't mean it's a priority in April when a whole bunch of things have changed and this is what's going on. So we are consciously making a decision to remove this one and replace it with this one. This is our top priority. And this is what people need to know. People actually like don't find that to be a bad thing. That sounds like it could be kind of a scary or negative conversation to have with teams, but it's actually not. It's actually a really high trust thing to do, because it means your leaders are being thoughtful about prioritization and not tone deaf to what's going on.
Absolutely. Number 3, I think, is a lack of ownership. I'll talk more about that in a bit when we get to kind of managing your OKRs. I'll let you know kind of how I've thought about OKR owners in the past. But if nobody owns it, then you do kind of wind up in a place where someone isn't kind of keeping track and keeping accountable towards that OKR. So you do want to have some kind of owner, whether that's an individual or a small team or something like that. You do want to have someone in charge of that. Number 4 is to write an OKR that is too complicated to measure. Yeah. And Karen's got a good set of questions, I know, of like, just, yeah, you got to double check yourself a little bit on this one.
Yeah, what happens if you don't and you have really complicated to measure things is like in the room when you're making OKRs, people are like, oh no, it's totally fine. Here's what you do. You're going to go to like this, like you're going to go to Google Analytics and get this information. You're going to cross-reference it with this. You're going to check that across that. And then you're just going to do that like once a day. And it's totally easy. It takes 5 minutes a day. Like nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to go and like track down all that stuff. So the questions are, do we already measure this today? Like if we don't measure this today, and we think that suddenly this is like going to magically become something we measure every week, that can be challenging, not impossible, just challenging. Do we all agree on how it's measured? The worst thing in an OKR meeting is to be like, well, is it though? Because, maybe like the way I measure it, it's like this. And it's like, oh no, the way I measure it, it's like this. So making sure that like, do we all agree on how this thing is measured? And then the third question is, measure today. Do we agree how it's measured? And can we do it and can we measure it in less than 10 minutes a week? So
Yeah.
and you got to have 2 out of 3, right? So like you got to have 2 out of 3 yeses on those. And if you don't, if it's no's across the board, it's probably not the best OKR for you, or else it's just going to be really, really complicated and needs like a really high level of ownership. If it's so important, but the answers to all those are no's, like make some of those no's yeses as quickly as possible.
Another one is if they're too quiet, if they aren't like this massive priority and you can't like, just as far as inspiring the teams, you want it to be something that is very overtly like a company objective. So you don't want them to be too quiet. You don't want them to be too easy. One of the things with OKRs is that you want to aim for, I'm going to say about a 7. It says 6 or 7, but if you're anything like me, a 6 feels like a total failure. So
I was going to say, Jamie, I can't believe you're saying that without breaking down in hives.
I'm going to say like 7 or 8. You should know your team, whether or not like a 6 would be totally demotivating or not, but you do want it to be a stretch goal when you're writing them. So You want it to be something that, you know, you have a 70% chance of succeeding at, basically. The other one, it would just be too unknown. So similar to what Karen is saying, as far as complicated to measure goes, one of the things that we had done in the past as a mistake was a metric that was establish and improve. It meant we hadn't even established the way to measure it, which to Karen's point is kind of failing before you start, because you have no idea how much time it might take to build the systems to measure that accurately. And then and improve was literally written like that. And we did it for like multiple OKRs before we realized
a lot.
That was the issue. And improve doesn't tell you like the specific, like by how much. You don't even know though, because you haven't started measuring it. So just don't make the mistake of writing one similar to that. Any last like little mistakes to share?
No, I think going back to and I know you're going to talk about measurement here in a minute, but that concept of like, just so that, you know, like I joke about us breaking out in hives about a 6 or a 7, but it is actually the hardest part of establishing OKRs newly on your team. So when you say to a team like, hey, you know, like every single person that you work with probably like had like, you know, they got straight A's in school and like they, you know, they got good grades, and a 6 or a 7 out of 10 was really unacceptable. In most of our lives, that feels really bad. And so the idea of like, let's set goals where we're going to be proud of ourselves if we hit 6 or 7 out of 10 on a 1 to 10 scoring basis. But that audacity of setting your OKRs much more audacious than it feels comfortable to achieve is like, it's a cornerstone of OKRs. It's a really, really important part. So whatever you need to do to kind of inspire and establish the idea of that audacity as being like a really good thing, and then like celebrating the heck out of 6s and 7s is really, really good. You know, you can, if you set your goal at something where you're going to hit it every single time, you're just not going to hit that audacious of goals. But I will say that like from experience, Jamie and I both experienced like teams that just like fell apart at the idea of setting an OKR that they knew was almost like felt pretty unattainable. That feels really scary to people. So making the whole thing a situation where like that audacity is celebrated, and over like achieving a 10 on everything is celebrated, is really important when you're doing this newly, but it's hard.
Yeah, for sure. And I know we talked a bit about celebrations as well. It's such an important part of it. But yeah, as far as measuring OKRs go, they're typically you measure the key result one of two ways. So one, you measure it on a scale of 1 to 10, again with 7 being your goal. A score of 0 means you made no progress towards it. A score of 10 means slam dunk. And you probably should have set something harder. But in any case, you learn this as you go through rounds and rounds of OKRs. And another way you can measure it besides the scale is just, did you do it or did you not do it? Sometimes there are going to be key results where it's totally binary, and that's totally okay as long as you understand that you're setting it that way. So when you write the OKR, you want to kind of think through, how am I going to measure this, and score it after it's written. The other thing was scoring OKRs, I think, is to do it really, really quickly. And I'll share the template that Karen helped me put together here. But really what you want is to be able to score it within like 5 minutes. You do not want to make it a complicated process that takes everyone a ton of time. You kind of want to do just like a lightning round. So we've got this spreadsheet, this framework for scoring things really quickly with the key result owners. And Karen, I'll let you kind of walk through how we've done like progress, confidence, and the red, yellow, greens, which were always
always fun. So this is if you're doing this on a monthly basis, this is on a quarterly OKR, this is what this looks like. You can also do this really well on a weekly cadence, and there's some really good reasons to do this on a weekly cadence if you can. And I've seen this done in like through a super little Google form. I've seen it done through some interesting Slack integrations, and then I've also seen it done as just truly a shared spreadsheet. People like are like, don't use spreadsheets. You must use OKR software, but it's not necessary. Keeping it simple is much more important. So if you said, okay, at the beginning of the quarter, like as we're starting off this OKR, hey, on 10,000 downloads, Jamie, where are we on the progress? So on a scale of 0 to 10 or 1 to 10, where are we today? And she's like, well, we have 0 downloads, so 0. And I'm like, all right, that sounds good. What's your confidence level that we're going to hit this OKR by the end of the quarter? She's like 7, right? We're looking at like line 5 here. And then at the end of every month, you basically kind of go through that scoring process again. So this is represented in percentages. You could do it on a 0 to 10 basis either way. And the idea again is to say, what's our progress? Like, you were a 0 out of 10 when we started. Maybe at the end of month 1, you're a 4. At the end of month, 2, you're an 8, whatever. And then we really like the idea of putting a confidence interval next to it, because a lot of times people would be scoring their OKRs, and if it's just a straight 0 to 10, they'd be like, well, I mean, I guess officially we're a 5, but I know we're going to hit it. I know it's going to be, a 9 by the end of the quarter. So I'm going to give it a 7. And what you really want to do is separate those two things. You want to just say all right, where are we today? What's our actual progress today? And then what's our confidence that we're going to hit it in the time frame we're going to hit it? And then that way, that can kind of give you your red, yellow, green. So then you can either do that on an automated kind of way, where it's if it's if it's a 0 to 4, it's a red. Or you can also have your managers or the people that are scoring those OKRs kind of decide on the basis of kind of gut, is this goal red, yellow, or green? Is it red, it's in trouble, we got to do something about it? Is it yellow, it's got some challenges, but it's going to be okay? Or it's green, it's we've made exactly how much progress we made, we're high confidence, and we're on our way. And that can really help then drive a conversation about what to do about it next.
Yep.
Sorry, that was a long explanation of scoring.
No, not at all. Awesome. So I'm going to move us really quickly into managed, and then make sure we get a nice 10-minute group of time for questions. So as far as managing OKRs go, one of the things that I think about whenever we're creating anything for employees, or whenever we're creating a piece of internal communications, which is what we do at Workshop, we really want to make sure that there are 3 things that we always hit with every piece of communication. We want to make sure the team feels inspired, feels informed, and feels included. One of the ways we'll do that, and I'll share it here. One of the ways we make them feel inspired, or make the team feel inspired, is to treat key objectives and key results basically like a marketing campaign. So these are examples of the ones that we created at Flywheel. We created logos for each company objective. You can create full-blown email campaigns. We do that in Workshop. Where you can create dedicated emails for each objective for those key results owners to kind of update with progress and share those widely with the team. You can create swag. That definitely happens. Sometimes we had an objective or a key result that the team got so behind that we created different swag specifically for that. You can create dedicated videos, really, you name it. But in terms of inspiring the team, I think thinking of it like an internal marketing campaign is a really good way to do that. OKRs are also fantastic for employee engagement. Most people feel much more inspired and motivated when the company goals and performance are really clearly communicated. I think we all know that people want to be connected to that greater company purpose and feel like their work is more meaningful and they're helping drive the company's success. Karen, what are other ways that you've kind of inspired teams with OKRs?
I think these are super, super good. I know we're going to talk about celebration a little bit. I think the concept of treating your OKRs like an internal marketing campaign is such an important note. Things like telling a single person success story with their own personal OKR. Or having them speak at a company all hands about this thing that they did, having your department, really get excited and rally behind an OKR that they're working on and talk about how it rolls up to the company level OKRs. Those successes and those kinds of things create not only a lot of like engagement and celebration and inspiration for your teams, they also just continually reinforce what the priorities of the company are. And the more you're reinforcing and getting other people to talk about your OKRs, the more you are just every day continuing to reinforce what are the priorities in the company, which is really cool to see. It has kind of a snowball effect that way.
Yeah. As far as including people in your kind of OKR planning process and scoring and all of that, I think one of the best ways to do that is to assign KR owners or objective owners as well. Basically an assigned leader that's responsible for kind of babysitting that key result all the way through and making sure it's moving along and it's not being forgotten about. So if at that last scoring session that OKR was kind of tagged yellow or red, this person is the one who's going to follow up with the people they need to make sure that the next time they score it, it's moved forward in the right way. We did it at Flywheel. We made it so that anyone in any department and at any level could be a key result owner. That worked really, really well in terms of like including people that you might not expect or including people just from a wide variety of roles. I mean, they didn't have, if they were just passionate about the key result, they could own it, whether or not, it made direct sense or not for their jobs. We've done that a few times. And really, it's just that person's goal to kind of guide the success of the key result and provide those updates. So
it's also a great personal, professional development opportunity for the person. So coming to somebody, if you have 8 key results across your whole company for the whole year, going to somebody and saying like, hey, I think you have a lot of leadership potential. How about you own this cross-company key result for the year? We're going to check in with you every month and ask you to give us progress updates on it. And also it is your responsibility to gather people from different departments across the company who are all in the efforts that are making this thing happen and get those efforts coordinated and tell the story of this key result all year long. That is cross-departmental management, that is goal setting, there's just a whole, communications, there's just a whole bunch of different professional skills that key result ownership can hit on. And so it's a great, and I think we found, and I found in other settings too, that it is a lot of times people feel like kind of honored to do that and excited to do that. So it's a great professional development opportunity.
Yeah, just establish leadership in a different way. And we often had them present it too. So if there was a story about a particularly successful key result, we would have that owner present that at the company all hands, not necessarily like the CEO presenting that information for them. So definitely a great opportunity there. And then the last piece for us is just how are we in keeping the company informed throughout this entire process? Karen's got this really great framework as far as like this idea of 7 repetitions per quarter.
Yeah. So, I mean, just like Jamie was saying, like internal marketing campaign, right? And so like for an external marketing campaign, you never show, your key audience, your brand or your message one time. You're always aiming to try to hit your audiences with things with at least 7 repetitions. And those are the brands and the companies and the things that we remember out in the rest of our lives. So, and so the idea is, okay, how do you make sure that it almost feels like organic and like it's not planned this way, but it's totally planned this way, that you're hitting your teams with repetitions about OKRs at least 7 times per quarter. So, and I would even argue you could do it more than that. And if people start talking about OKRs themselves, then you get a lot more kind of virality with the ideas inside your own company. But so one way to do it and just kind of make sure you're doing this is, once a quarter, you do an update on last quarter's OKRs and talk about any changes like we were talking about before with this quarter's OKRs. So like one big OKR presentation. And then weekly highlights. So whether you do an all hands or if you have a company newsletter or an email sequence or, a Slack update, if you just choose one OKR to highlight in some way every week, if you've got 3 top level OKRs, you're going to hit them all about 4 times in a quarter, which is cool. And then 2 intermittent celebrations. So per OKR, we get really big wins from intermittent celebration. So if you see a team that is achieving a department OKR and you're super excited about it and proud of them, like order them pizza for lunch, tell them you're proud of what they did, and make a plan. If you're the person who kind of owns and oversees OKRs in the company, make a plan to do 2 of those for every OKR every quarter. It will feel totally spontaneous and like, oh my gosh, they just bought us pizza for achieving this OKR to your teams. But to you, you know that you are constantly kind of adding and touching on celebrations of those OKRs and reinforcing the idea of success with those throughout your company all quarter long. So seven repetitions a quarter. That's what you're after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the only last thing that I have is just a couple like miscellaneous pieces of advice. And one we already covered, the fact that individual OKRs, whether it's the OKR ownership being something that kind of helps with professional development, but also just having them write their own individual OKRs if you wanted to cascade it all the way down, or if that person just wants to be kind of eager to grow and they want to be challenged more, having them write individual OKRs is also a good way to kind of continue to challenge them, and a good thing to update in one-on-one meetings. The number one thing I think though is really when it comes to OKRs during a work day or like a work week, if you just think about what you can do to drive progress towards OKRs in that particular moment, rather than thinking of them as this like huge audacious goal, if you have that downtime, I think that's what I saw the biggest progress was when a team wasn't working on specific pieces of like their role that were aligned to like performance metrics or something like that. During that other time and during the course of their day-to-day work, they were thinking about how to move progress towards that OKR. It can be really challenging if you're looking for a set of like huge projects for that particular key result. So even if you're just thinking of like little incremental moments to kind of move that OKR forward, I think that's a good way to approach it. But I want to save time, I know just get so excited. So I want to open things up for Q&A. Feel free to hop into the Q&A section if you have a particular question or have run into anything in particular with OKRs in the past, and we're happy to share our personal experience with them. I will also link a bunch of stuff in the chat right now as far as where to connect with Karen. Again, the links to all of the slides, the templates, and I'll add the recording to the Google Drive folder too, and a couple of other resources that you can check out too. Also, if you haven't read this book and you would like it, if you just email me, I'll put my email in the chat, I'll buy it for you. So just let me know. Free extra giveaway. So I'll add all that and then let's go with this first question. Karen.
That's not what that says.
No, that's what it says. No, it says, how would you both go about coaching someone to step back out of the weeds and be able to think more strategically longer term versus more tactically shorter term?
Okay, I can start on that one. I think that is, it is so much about making time to do so. So the idea of like, all right, if somebody is so in the weeds and they're just very tactical, short-term, day-to-day, and their job, their role is really and truly is to be in that longer term and strategic place, where are you carving out time in the week where that is the expectation and that's the possibility? So creating cadence around that time, and really, it's a really big challenge. Like one of the hardest things that you hear about OKRs is people who will be like, how am I supposed to do all of this stuff on OKRs when I've got this, entire marketing team to run, or this entire, this thing to do, or this thing to run? A lot of times you'll hear managers and leaders say that, and I think it's a sometimes kind of a challenging message to say, but really at the, when you are a leader in the company, a manager in the company, then if you are spending all of your time on the shorter term work, then you're probably doing the wrong work, right? You probably need to, the job actually is to be more strategic and longer term so you can better support your teams in that way. So I think coaching somebody to really, really, really carve out the time to do that, and have help with doing it. Often people are like, I'm supposed to be thinking strategically, like, how should I do that? Making sure that to pair them up with a person in the company who's great at it, and giving them really specific and clear time and protect that time to do that, I think is a really, really helpful way to get that done.
Yeah, I second a lot of what you said, but just even playing with like the time frames a little bit and helping them to write their own sort of sets of OKRs. So asking them like, what would you like to achieve in this role, or personally or professionally within this time frame? And then how can we sort of start to break that down into smaller increments so that you are making progress towards that larger strategy? So you can, OKRs can be written by literally anyone. Once you feel confident enough kind of with the general framework, like you can put that together. So I do think like going through a personal OKR exercise with them might be a trick.
I think that's super good. That sort of reminds me of one thing that we used to do, is in the onboarding process for new hires. One of the things that we used to always recommend to new hires is that every new hire creates one OKR, like an objective, and two or three little key results for their first 30 days or their first 30 or 60 days in the company, and to share that with their manager. That creates kind of gets people into the culture of OKRs as soon as they start. And it also just helps, it can also really help managers be in that strategic mindset with their team members who are creating those more tactical OKRs for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Feel free to add another question. I know Craig had a really good comment in chat about the ultimate dream the minute you said company objectives and key results, which is a beautiful dashboard that showcases kind of your progress towards all of them. Karen, I don't remember how long you spent on building that at FIO. It was a long time, but when you get it done, I think there's nothing satisfying.
It is. It's true. Yeah. We went through a lot of iterations. There's so many of them out there. Like there's so many options for how to do it out there, and it is like totally the dream to like have everything on screens and everything in this beautiful dashboard. And lots of people will be like, and then you just automate it. So like all the information is flowing from all these different places and it automatically updates the dashboard all the time. That's great. I would say though, that like, it is just as valuable to have managers and leaders saying like, it's a 7 this week, like it's a 4 this week, like it's an 8 this week, and doing that. Like, don't be afraid of manual when it comes to OKR. It really is. It's not necessary for everything to be perfectly automated and on a beautiful dashboard in order to be using OKRs really well. Craig, I'm with you. The automation never works that well. That's right.
No, that's also how we discovered so many measuring mistakes.
Yeah, it does help with that.
Yeah, the minute you're like, oh, I actually don't have a system to measure this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Good.
Awesome. Well, it looks like that is all the time we have for today. Again, just email me if you want a copy of that book, and all the links and stuff are in chat, but also send a follow-up email. And yeah, just reach out and connect with us if you have any additional questions or want to talk more about OKRs.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.